Okay, everybody, I'm back. I didn't have enough storage yesterday to do my whole story, so you get it in the second part. And I left off with getting my vaccine, and the second shot got me pretty sick, and it took me a while to recover, but I did. But a couple of weeks later, I noticed that I started to smell mold, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. But I thought it was like in our back entryway, where my kids bring all their shoes, and like they leave their shoes and their backpacks and their coats and stuff. And so I was like tear through there, like trying to find the source of the smell, and I couldn't. But meanwhile, it was raining a lot that spring, and we were getting some water leaking into our basement. There was anything we could do about it. We had an old farmhouse, and the basement floor in there was dirt. And so, yeah, I mean, I knew, but like at the same time, I like didn't comprehend that what that could do. But so, anyways, we decided to go up to our land up north, close to where I grew up. We have a cabin and 80 acres, and we went up there for the weekend. We all get sick with the chest cold, and at the same time, there are ticks crawling all over me, not over everybody else. So I have this theory that people with Lyme disease attract ticks, and I've heard it from other people, but it seems to be true because, like, I can't even tell you the number of ticks that were crawling on me that weekend, and everybody was commenting, like, why are they all on you? So I was, like, pulling, like, handfuls of ticks off my clothes. Well, it was this, I feel like I just kind of had this perfect storm of bad stuff happen to me. So we get back home, I'm struggling with this bad chest cold. A week in, I wake up with my leg is really sore, and I look down and I have this giant bullseye on my leg. I was like, okay, I've had Lyme before, I can handle it. So the center of this was like dark purple, and then there's a big red ring around it, and the diameter was about 5 inches. It seemed like it was like almost the same as the length of my hand. So I go into the doctor right away, and like from across the room, he can see I wore some shorts, and so he could just see it. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's classic bullseye. We don't even need to question it, but we will get a blood draw just in case." And he put me on 21 days of doxy. So I decided to take that week off of my work, and just quickly, I owned 2 businesses at this time. I'm a super hard worker. I work about 80 hours a week. So I take time off. We go on vacation. Wait, I gotta pause. I didn't take time off right away. That same day that I got diagnosed with Lyme, I had to work. And I worked a big long shift, like 35 hours or so, and with my food truck, my business. And by the time I was done the next night, I was basically delirious with fever, and the pain at the site of the bite was excruciating. And just to make this go a little faster, it turned out that I had a secondary infection at the bite site. It was cellulitis. I had to go into the ER, and get another antibiotic, Bactrim, because that type of infection can be fatal if you don't treat it. And thankfully, I knew what cellulitis was because my mom had it before. So thanks, Mom. You saved my life. Because I don't think I would have gone in otherwise, because I would have just thought, well, it's just Lyme, and it's just a really bad case of it or something. So I knew, and I went in, and I got treated. So I'm put on 2 antibiotics. We decided I need to take time off to heal. So we go on a family vacation for a week over to Michigan. And it's beautiful. I'm not feeling that great, but I'm managing. And but while we were there, I started to get red dots on my thumbs, and it was really painful, like where the red dots were. And then a couple days in, I get it on my first fingers, and then on my fourth finger, and then I get this red line across my thumb. Well, we come back from vacation. I try to work again. My hands are so painful where those dots and stuff are. And then after a few days, I worked, but like it was torture because my hands hurt so much. And I was a baker as well. I have a bakery. So trying to work through that was really, really difficult, but I'm a tough cookie, so I did it. Yeah, I had a crazy schedule. But then I wake up on like the following Monday and my toes have the same markings as my fingers. Like exactly coordinating with each, like where the dot is on each finger was on like each digit on my toes. It was really weird, and my toes hurt really badly. I couldn't put socks or shoes on. And like even when I would walk through the yard, like the blades of grass touching it were like, it felt like knives were slicing my toes. So I call the doctor. I'm like, what's going on with this stuff? And the doctor who saw me initially isn't in. My normal practitioner isn't in. Everybody's on vacation. So I go in and I see this young girl who's like just an assistant. And she said, I don't really know, but I know you need to stay on your doxy to kill the Lyme. So just try to wait it out and give me a call back if it doesn't go away in a couple of days. So I go home. Of course it gets worse. And then my nails turn yellow. Like really weird. So I go back in. And she's like, I talked to the other doctors and they think that you're having an allergic reaction to doxy. So you need to be put on amoxicillin. So I had already taken the doxy for like 18 days and there's only 21 days of it. But they could see that my Lyme wasn't getting better. I still had this giant bullseye. The secondary infection was better, which was good. And so I go on doxy while the other doctor's on vacation. And my symptoms get worse. I start getting electric shocks. Literally in my fingers, it would feel like I was being electrocuted. Then I started getting tingling and numbness on the left side of my body. It started in my foot, and then it went up and up and up. And then when I felt it go up and over my head and in my face, I freaked out. I thought I was having a stroke. I started to lose cognitive ability. I was having trouble speaking. My vision was like suddenly would blur. I was like to where nothing would be in focus. Yeah, and I just had a lot of neuropathy. And so eventually I went in and saw the doctor again. Another weird thing that happened to me was when I tried to work in the bakery, anytime I would try to turn on or turn off an appliance, I would get electrocuted. Like stick your finger in a light socket, kind of electrocuted. Nobody else did, just me. And so when I went in to consult with him, I'm like, this is getting worse. The other thing that was happening was I was getting really bad fevers every single night. So I've been on antibiotics for over a month now, right? It should be better. And so the doctor was like, I don't think this is Lyme. I think something else is going on, and I don't know what it is. So just give me a few days. I need to study, and I need to consult some other doctors. Now, I actually really appreciated that. I felt like most doctors would just make something up, but he is telling me he's going to work hard to figure it out. So I respected him, and I went home, called me back a couple days later and told me he and the other doctors believe that I have Guillain-Barré syndrome from the vaccine. And that I would go paralyzed, most likely. Like the troubles that I was having with the left side of my body were indicative of, that I would go paralyzed, at least on that side of my body for a while, and there wasn't much they could do, and etc., etc. So that was scary news. But then he said, but I also want you to go in and see a neurologist. We want to make sure that you don't have something else going on, and you may have to get a spinal tap because you may have spinal Lyme. So that's Lyme, or neurological Lyme. So that's when the Lyme disease breaks through the blood-brain barrier and gets into your spinal fluid and into your brain. And that's actually like, I don't have that, guys, just so you know. And that's a whole nother ball game. So if that's what you have, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to help much with that because that's much worse. So they wanted to rule that out, he said. So I go to the neurologist. By this time, like, I'm losing cognitive ability. I have a really hard time talking, keeping my eyes open. There's just a lot of symptoms, like almost too many to mention. But the main things was like this whole numbness on the left side of my body, and my cognitive ability, my vision and mental capacity just was deteriorating. And so he tells me that, they're worried about all these other types of infections like meningitis or, spine or neurological Lyme and other things they want to test for, and MS, my good old MS. And so they schedule the spinal tap or lumbar puncture, whatever you want to call it. Now, if you're new to Lyme, do not get one of these, please. It's not necessary, and it can make things a lot worse. So, but I didn't know anything. I just completely trusted them. I get the spinal tap done. I get a spinal fluid leak. So if you know what that is, like, look it up. It's pretty bad. So it's basically the fluid keeps leaking at the site where they stuck the needle in to draw the fluid from. And it's supposed to just close up because they use a really tiny needle. But for me, it didn't. And so you're continually leaking spinal fluid, which is really, really, really painful. So your head, if you're sitting up, your head will feel like it's about to explode. So I was dealing with that, and they told me I had to go lay down flat in my bed and that it should heal on its own. But it didn't. And so nobody knew, guys, that I was being exposed to toxins at home, specifically in my bedroom. We had that dirt floor in our basement, and the guy that installed our ductwork, we had all the ductwork replaced when we bought this house. He didn't do it right, and he left some of them just dangling into the basement, and that happened to be one that went right to our bedroom, right near our bed. And with that water leaking in, we had some molds growing in the basement. And so because I had that spinal fluid leak, I had to lay flat in bed 24/7 until it healed. And so I had already developed toxicity, but this time in bed just accelerated everything. And I'm going to do a whole nother session on mold toxicity, but mold toxicity will make your Lyme out of control, and other diseases, because it suppresses your immune system. And mold toxicity itself has a whole bunch of symptoms. And I started to develop those symptoms as I was laying there. One of the main symptoms of toxicity from molds is basically psychological issues. Like, you get extremely angry extremely fearful and like anxiety attacks. And so then there's also a lot of physical things. And I can't go into all of them because I just don't have enough time. But the main things I was struggling with was like a choking sensation in my neck, in my throat and neck, extreme ear pain and tinnitus. So I had this really loud pitch ringing constantly in my ear, and then vision issues, and my throat felt like it was swelling, my tongue felt like it was swelling and itching. Yeah, and lots of issues. But you need to realize then that I was dealing with that while I was forced to lay down flat. I couldn't move because every time I sat up, my head would like explode, and when I lay down, I would have trouble breathing, and I felt like I was choking, and so it was like this impossible situation. And I cannot express to you guys how dark that time was for me. And I don't have enough time within this video to explain it all, but I would have rather have died than lived like that any longer. They tried to do a procedure to fix a spinal fluid leak, but in doing that, I got an anaphylactic reaction. I almost died to one of the meds they tried to give me before the procedure. And then they tried the procedure and my heart just crashed. And so then I couldn't do the procedure. And so I had to keep laying in that bed until like about 8 to 10 days later, the leak healed on its own. And I was able to get up. But at that point, I was so toxic. Like my body was so toxic from the mold that I had this whole new realm of just physical and mental issues. And then we had to wait for the results of the spinal tap. Like, it took them like a month to get back to me. In the meantime, all of my symptoms are getting worse. I'm laying in bed almost all the time, like I can't get up. And the furthest I could walk was, to the bathroom and back, or I couldn't even really get down the driveway without feeling like I was going to collapse. And also, like, I just had tingling, and the left side of my body was still all crazy like that. And I still had the bullseye. I still had all these marks and all this yellow nails, and all this stuff was going on. And and I wasn't hearing back from that neurologist. And so I decided, okay, guys, I have to do something for myself, So I started looking into going to a different doctor. In the meantime, the original doctor who told me that I had Lyme and then who told me I had Guillain-Barré syndrome, called me, or his nurse called me, to tell me the results of my Lyme test. And that said that I don't have Lyme. They tested negative. And I was like, and she said, so we're happy to tell you that you don't have Lyme. I'm like, what are you talking about? I still have the bullseye on my leg. And I just felt like I'm going through this all again, where nobody believes me. They're just going to tell me that I'm just going psycho. Because, like, part of me felt like I was. And with mold toxicity, you kind of go a little crazy and mentally. And so I end up making a call to the Tick-Borne Illness Center in Woodruff, Wisconsin. And they agree they're totally great over the phone. They agree to see me. But I have to wait a whole month. And I have to pay out of pocket. These Lyme clinics, they have all these different treatments that they can do because they're private clinics. And so you have to pay. Insurance doesn't cover it. And so that was a big decision. But I wasn't getting any help from these doctors that my insurance would cover. So I made the decision we were just going to do it. You know, I hadn't been working this whole time because I couldn't. So our income level is like cut in half, and it's scary. But and this was the cheapest clinic I could find. And so they actually ended up getting me in early, like 2 weeks early, because somebody canceled. And I get to see this tick specialist. He's actually not even in the room, like he's just a telehealth guy. I went all the way up there, and the doctor wasn't even there. They didn't even tell me that ahead of time. But so it didn't have the greatest bedside manner, but he's knowledgeable. And he told me, after hearing my story, he told me, I think that you have Bartonella, Lyme, and Babesia, and that you just didn't get enough antibiotics. And we're going to put you on a different antibiotic because I do think that you have an allergic reaction to these other two. So he didn't say anything about mold or anything like that. Like, he didn't recognize what was happening to me. So he puts me on cephorexim and on a probiotic and on glutathione, which would help to detox my body. And he has me do all these blood tests and stuff. So within a few days of taking this med, I had an anaphylactic reaction. And I was rushed to the ER in an ambulance. And yeah, and it was to the medication. And honestly, guys, at that point, I was just so frazzled emotionally. When we got back from the hospital, I told my husband, like, I can't do it. And I just had this instinct that there was something in our house that was making me worse. Because when I was in the house, I felt worse. So when we got back, I said, honey, I'm not going to go back in. I'm going to sleep in the truck tonight. Because, like, literally there was just this deep warning in my heart that I had to listen to myself. And I know I'm cutting things out of my story because I had to be quick. But so I slept in the truck. And I did feel different. And I told my husband the next day, you know, and I was having like residual anaphylaxis type reactions all day long. My heart would go crazy. My throat would start feeling like I was closing, but then it would kind of subside. And I talked to my doctor, and they said, yeah, we got to take you off that med. And we're, you know, let us consult a little bit. So it'll be a few days before we get back to you. So I stopped taking that antibiotic. I got a tent. I stayed out in my tent. But anytime I would go back into the house, I would just like, my brain would feel like it was like vibrating and going crazy. And I would hear this giant ringing, and I would feel like I was choking. So like, it became really obvious that something in the house was bothering me. It wasn't just my tick diseases. And then I started to react to even foods. Like, I had a sandwich, I had an anaphylactic reaction. I had an orange, I had an anaphylactic type reaction. And I started freaking out, like I was terrified to eat. And then I called my doctor about it, and they were like, okay, we need you to go in and get an EpiPen. So, all right. And then the doctor also said, you know, I think we need to test you for mold toxicity because it sounds like you're reacting to your house. So I get tested for mold toxicity. And during this, and he also tells me, don't go back in your house. You know, like, that's most likely what's going on. So, and he said, I'm going to put you on an all herbal protocol for your Lyme and for these other diseases. So I ended up getting a tent, staying in our yard. And guys, I started to get better. it was like I could tell my cognitive abilities were coming back just slightly. And the choking sensation went away, but it would return if I had, because I had to use the bathroom. So I went into the house, and anytime I was in the house, all that stuff would come back like instantly. So it was really obvious that this was going on, and it took several weeks for me to get the results back from the mold toxicity mycotoxin urine test. But I tested way high, yeah, like for gliotoxins and sterigmatocystin, and then I was also over for ochratoxin. Um, so that was like a huge answer. I felt justified, like, see, guys, there's something else going on. Like, I have this toxicity. And so that began, like, knowing that that was actually what was happening was the beginning of my recovery. So I was put on all these herbs, which, I'll do another video that basically explains all of that. I was put on these herbs. I live outdoors. And then eventually my husband builds me a tiny house, which I move into by myself. I can't keep anything from the house because I'm reacting to everything and everybody. Anybody who comes near me from the house, I get huge reactions. And one of the biggest things was like anger. Like my brain would just like freak out whenever anyone was near me that smelled moldy. I had like reactions when I would go to, like eventually I was strong enough to like go into the store, but in the store there was moldy stuff everywhere. Like, you guys don't know how much moldy stuff is in the grocery store until you have mold toxicity and you can smell it. And then I started reacting to like perfumes and other toxins too. Like if people were smoking cigarettes, like, whoa, my brain would freak out, and like there were times where I would collapse. So it became just so much easier for me to just stay in my little tiny house alone, because I was healing. And anytime that I would get exposed to stuff, it would take me several days to recover. So the mold toxicity was a huge, huge part in figuring out why I was so sick. And now that I was on the herbs, and now that I was out of the house, like, really, at least half of my symptoms went away. The neuropathy in my legs went away. The migraine, I had a constant migraine before, went away. The blurred vision went away. The choking went away. So many symptoms just disappeared. And I was left with like the classic symptoms of all the tick diseases that I had. So I'm put on herbs, and throughout the next basically 7 months, I learn how to detox. I'm taking these herbs, is slowly killing things off. And by May of the following spring in 2022, I started to feel like, hey, I'm getting my life back. I actually started playing tennis, like I was doing well. But then I got bit again, and I got another bullseye. But I thought, I got this. I recovered this last time, and I was in a much better state because I wasn't full of mold toxins. And so I actually was okay, but then I got bit again. And with that one made a huge bullseye on my right inner thigh. And I got a kidney infection. And so, like, this is like one thing after another, guys. Like, I was just starting to get better, and then I get sick again. But my body must have been so much stronger because it didn't have that mold toxicity that I was able to recover from both of those new infections very, very quickly. So they kept me on all of my herbal medicines, and they added in an antibiotic on that when I got that kidney infection. And so by the middle of August, I was doing pretty well. It wasn't perfect, but I was doing okay. And then I found the secret to my success. I decided to go camping. And I went to a park on Lake Michigan called Point Beach State Park. And when I was there, it was like a miracle happened. I was on the beach. After only 30 minutes of being there, guys, I literally had 0 symptoms. Like none. My brain was still a little slow. But like the joint pains, the fatigue, all of that, like, was completely gone. And I told my husband, like, there's something going on here. Like, I don't know what it is, like, why I'm feeling so much better here, but I don't want to leave. And so we arranged for me to stay there. And literally, guys, I was running on the beach, doing my yoga, playing tennis. Like, I was normal. And I could feel my brain getting better. And I remember my kids came camping there with me, and I remember the moment where I realized that my brain was better. Because throughout this whole thing, like, my brain was super slow. I had lost the ability to, like, talk and then also think or listen to somebody and then, like, process any other information at the same time. Like, I couldn't do more than one thing at a time. But I remember realizing that I was thinking some thoughts to myself, and I was listening to my son tell me something, and I could comprehend it all. And I was like, wait, my brain feels normal. So I stayed there into September, and I went off of my meds, and I was basically healthy. And we had just a beautiful fall. So I came home. We started our homeschooling again. I still lived by myself because I could still feel like if I got exposed to mold, that was the only time that I would feel off. Like if someone moldy came near me. And there's way more to my story. I just don't have time to tell you. But our house, we got remediated, but I still couldn't be in it. I still reacted to it. So anyways, so I would go back to that beach every chance that I could, and because we had a really nice fall, and so it just kind of rejuvenated me. And now, guys, it's a kind of, we're in end of February. I've been doing well. Recently, though, I got a cold, and so that's why I'm a little bit groggy, and it did affect me a bit. And I don't know if you caught that, like, so many times I would get a cold and then I would get Lyme symptoms. So I haven't had Lyme symptoms, but I have had mold toxicity symptoms on and off. So I still have to be really, really careful around molds. And that's the only time where I don't feel right and I don't feel good. It's when I get exposed to a toxin or a mold toxin. So that's my journey to this point, guys. And you can see, like, hey, I can talk. I can smile. I have normal emotions. Like, so I skipped over a lot of my story. Like, when I was doing the whole healing, yeah, my personality was very weird and very different, very angry. I had no emotions except for anger and depression. So there's a lot more than I could say and I want to say. So I'm going to have to do more videos, but I just want you to know that, like, that's the basics of my journey. And mold toxicity was the missing link to why I was not healing on those antibiotics. And So if you are someone who has like gone through years and years and years of trying to heal from Lyme and you're not healing, or even months like I did, I encourage you to contact me and talk to me about it. And I can usually tell if someone has mold toxicity by their symptoms. And I can give you advice and help and encouragement. And I just want to be there for you guys, and I want to help you heal faster. So I'm not a doctor. I'm just a mom. And I'm living it, and I am fighting, and I will not give up. And I'm here for you. Blessings.